Check.
We're live right now.
Hey everybody, my name's Chioki. How's it going? Okay, so I'm the Director of Community Media here at the ICA, and I guess I run a thing called the VPM ICA Community Media Center, which just opened, oh my God, like the first Friday in November. This is like our fourth or fifth program since then. I'm exhausted. But today we have like a super cool guest, you guys. Well, first off, I just want to acknowledge that like the crowd is awesome, like already, like in terms of like we have, the children of the future. We have someone who I heard interviewing Malcolm Gladwell the other day. Whatever, it's fine. We've got Audre Lorde's biographer. We have an amazing artist. We have someone who is on a midwife who has like seen the new life of thousands of babies or whatever. We have a chief curator. We have like the person who is the reason that anything that I think gets done. Like it's ridiculous. Yeah, no, like it's wild in here, and I'm happy to share with you our special guest for today. Okay, here's the thing. So I listen to a bunch of podcasts, and making podcasts is easy. Making a good podcast is way hard. Like the distance is just like infinite. All right. I just had like I was going to give you an example of like Emmanuel Levinas's like concept of a person, where the infinity is part of the distance that's between them, and that's like the distance between like making a podcast and a good podcast. But why do I have to do that? Like, there's no need for all that. Let's just keep it chill. All right, so I listen to a lot of shows, and I am like, great, next. That was a good try. Okay, next. this show is like quietly reliable, so that can go in this pile. And there's only a handful of shows that I feel are very good, and there's only a handful of shows that seem effortless that are very good. Does that make sense? So for instance, I take Invisibilia to be one of the greatest podcasts ever made. I've seen the message wall, I've seen their planning, like at NPR headquarters, and they are working on those shows. They only make like a handful of shows a year. That show is hard to make. And I think that Love and Radio is one of the greatest podcasts ever made. And I know Nick Vanderkook, and I have watched Nick Vanderkook's kids while he frantically tries to finish a show. So like that podcast is it sounds good, but it sounds like it was hard to make. Okay. I listened to this show called The Secret Adventures of Black People that is just casually brilliant. It's so, like, it's just clever, right? It's like one of the things that makes this show good is that it's just clever. Like, imagine something that you might hear on any old podcast, like, oh, well, they're reading today's news, and then they're like riffing off of it. Okay, great. What if you were to read today's news from like 1887? Right? What if you were reading the news, the Black people news from back then, but then still doing the riff? You see what I mean? So it's just oh no, I'm gonna be like really clever, and then from there I can make these moves. But of course that's not exactly true, because our guest Nichole Hill is someone who is very good at producing podcasts. Formerly the producer on a show from Radiotopia called The Truth, and then. But we learned today will be, can I say it? Is it a secret? Can I say it? She's now working on a podcast for Tracy Ellis Ross. So maybe you should get better podcast friends. Whenever I'm telling my students about, like, you should listen to this show to get an idea of what a podcast can sound like and how you can produce a podcast, I always send them The Secret Adventures of Black People. And I am so excited today to present to you Nichole Hill.
That was so nice. You did a good job. I said, make me sound good. You did it. Hello, everyone. Good evening. It's very nice to meet you. I have not done this outside of my computer in a year, so I'm like, where do I stand? What do? I might tell you to mute yourselves or something. Just bear with me. My name's Nichole Hill. Like Joki and so generously said, I am the host and the creator of The Secret Adventures of Black People. And what I'm going to be talking to you about today are tools from audio fiction that you can use to enhance your storytelling. I imagine your nonfiction storytelling. So let's begin. So first I'm going to cover audio fiction, sort of the ingredients that go into it. Spoiler alert, these are the ingredients. Great scenes, paying attention to sound design and music, having great characters, and then hopefully there'll be time for Q&A, but all throughout the presentation, I'll give you an opportunity to ask questions. And then we have Ronald Young Jr. here. He has a microphone, and so he will run you the mic. But what we're gonna be doing is listening to a lot of audio and then talking about what we hear, because I wanna be really interactive, and I know that everyone in the room has something that you can contribute in terms of like your ear, in terms of what you know about storytelling. So I just kind of love to turn the presentation over to you all and make you do some of the work for me. So I hope that that's okay. Okay, to start, I'm gonna tell you a little bit about myself. So I have been in education reform for the last 10 or so years. I'm very passionate about that. I think it's very important. On the side, I love podcasts. And so I listen to podcasts all the time. When I'm at work, I listen to it all day and all night. It was my favorite thing. This is a picture of me. I organized a listening party for the last episode of Serial. And I would always just like force my coworkers to listen to podcasts and like create big events around them, because it's what I loved. Eventually, I got to the point where I was sort of like, okay, My career in education reform is advancing, and I do love this work, but it's getting to feel a little bit much. The politics of it, what I need to do to get to like the next level, I'm not sure that I want to do that. And on the other hand, I really love storytelling and podcasting. So I'm kind of wrestling with these two things, and I decide I'm going to invest a little bit more. The way I've been investing in myself personally, I'm going to invest in my hobbies. So I start taking storytelling classes. I start working on a podcast with Ronald Young Jr. I start taking improv classes. I start doing all kinds of different things that sort of like excite me personally in the same ways that I had invested in myself professionally. And I realized like I might want to take a chance on myself personally and switch careers. But I like stability, but I don't know, and I went back and forth, and then I finally decided that I was going to pursue a full-time career in the arts, in storytelling, and I went to work for a small nonprofit that did live storytelling events, and I was so excited. My friend and I went to London, and we like cheers, and we said, oh my gosh, because she also had made some professional moves, and we said, oh my gosh, we did it, we bet on ourselves, 2020 is gonna be our year, we've nailed it. It did not work out that way. That live arts nonprofit obviously laid us all off during the pandemic. And I was all of a sudden like, what am I gonna do? Why did I make this insane move at this time? But on the day that I got laid off, I actually launched my podcast, The Secret Adventures of Black People. And because of all of the people that I had been talking to when I had sort of been in between what I was gonna do, I was able to amplify, more and more people heard the show and reached out to me about producing for them. And so I was like, okay, I'll do this for a little while until I get back into education reform. So I was doing that, but then jobs kept coming, and so I decided to become a freelancer. This is the freelance, if anybody ever wants to freelance, I highly recommend you get the Freelancer's Bible. It's very, very helpful. I had no idea how to freelance. I had no idea how you do your taxes when you're a freelancer, but I decided that this is what I wanted to do. I figured it out. And now I am a full-time audio producer, and I've worked on a bunch of different shows, and I teach classes in story edit, and I think I made, this is good. The right decision has been made. Things have worked out the way that they should. I imagine in 10 years it'll look totally different, but for today, I'm very happy. So that's me. Let me tell you what I just did now. I just told you all a story. This is my kind of professional story. And whenever you're telling a story, it follows a certain narrative arc. And one of the first ingredients of audio fiction is that it's got to be a story. Even though it's fake, it still needs to be a story. And everyone sort of knows the ingredients of a story because you've heard them your whole life. They're ingrained in us as humans. And so the way that they go is you start off with exposition. So it's, there it is. So it's, hello, this is the person, this is what they're like, just kind of orient you to the world. This is once upon a time, that territory. Next, you move into the conflict. So what is the person wrestling with? And so for me, it was, do I want to stay in education reform or do I want to take this chance on the arts? After that, you move into the rising action. So this is sort of when the character is starting to have to confront that decision until you get to the climax where your character finally makes a decision. Once you hit the climax, you want to get out of that story really fast. And so that's why you see, that's why it drops as quickly as it does, because no one cares anymore. And so, you know, I just told you quickly, I launched a podcast, I'm a freelancer now. But that's sort of that's the falling action, and the resolution is, you know, I was working on something and I really love podcasting, now I work in podcasting, the end. But any kind of a fiction story, the first element, the most important element, and sometimes it can get overlooked because it seems so obvious, but it's really important that you base all of your things in story. Next up, in audio fiction are scenes. So when you're reporting a story, it's not so important that you place the story anywhere in particular. So people are usually in very quiet, very pristine audio booths. And you get clear, clean audio that gives you the sense that the reporter is not biased, not like, you know, driven by anything that they're seeing, they're just reporting the facts. In audio fiction, who cares? You want to put the listener in a specific place, in a specific time, and then you want to hold them there. Just like in a movie, place them somewhere and have it mean something. And then next, you want to use sound design, you want to use music, you want to use all kinds of different tools that you would use, again, in movies to enhance the scene, to illustrate the feeling, to help you show rather than tell what's going on. And then finally, you want characters. So you don't want your story just told by a reporter. You want a person who is biased, you want a person who you can connect with, and every single voice in an audio fiction story is a character. So you don't just have, typically when you're doing audio fiction, a lot of times what I tell my students is they're hoping that they can have a dispassionate narrator who's just sort of telling you, hey, we're on a spaceship and it's hurtling through space, but that's not what's important. This is about a love story. But everyone's gonna wonder, who's that narrator? Why is that person there? In a way that you wouldn't wonder about a reporter. So these are all of the elements, and now we're gonna dive into them a little more specifically. I'm gonna play a little piece of audio for you. Oops, okay. I'm gonna play some audio for you. So for the past year, I have been working on a show called The Truth, which Choki beautifully, that's what it sounds like in the beginning, you'll hear it. And The Truth is an audio fiction podcast. And each episode is a different story. Like, think a little bit like The Twilight Zone. It's not the best description, but it's a little bit like that. And it's completely audio fiction. The goal is to create movies for your ears. And so I'm gonna play a clip from an episode of a show called The Shadow of the Hum. And it's an apocalyptic story that's part of a larger series. And it's about, there's a sound that happens that has caused a bunch of people in the earth to disappear. And some people have survived and some people are gone. So in this scene, you're gonna hear a character who's all alone and who has developed a kind of unusual coping mechanism for being alone. I'm gonna see if you all can guess what the coping mechanism is. And this character is walking through a place, trying to get to a couple other characters that he had met before in a previous episode, but he had been really weird and had done some shady stuff, and now they don't really want to talk to him anymore. And so he's nervous and he's trying to figure out, how do I make up for being really weird? I hope they'll be my friend. So I'm gonna play, let's say about we'll see how we feel. 3 minutes of it, and then I'll pause, and then we'll go through these questions. So as you're listening, be thinking about this, and think about the ingredients of a scene that I just shared with you, and see what you notice about sound and what it's telling you, and the characters in the scene. See what you see as you listen.
Okay, door opens, she'll say, "Hi, Hook, come on in." And I'll say, "Hi, Millie." No, "Hey, Millie, what's up?" No, I'm not gonna say what's up. That's, "Hey, Millie, nice to see you. Thanks for inviting me." Okay, yeah. I'm sorry for... why would you bring that up? So stupid. It's in the past. Yesterday is not ours to recover, but tomorrow is ours to win or lose. And I'm gonna win it. I'm gonna.
That's right. You will.
Okay. They open the door. She'll be like, "What do you have there?" And I'll say, "Books. I know you like fantasy. I didn't know what you'd already read, so I brought Moonlight Archer, The Chronicles of Haymore. I have the first Inward Paladin book. I brought some games, too. I found a checkers board once, so I made my own pieces, and I was hoping I'd find someone to play with. And cards. If you know card games, I know a few, I think. And...
That sounds like a lot.
Okay.
For a first visit.
Then I'll just say, just some stuff. But if you do ask...
We're not gonna fucking ask.
What we'll probably ask is, how long has it been since you've seen another person, Huck?
Okay, that rock is this here, so it should be... You can do this. Hello? Millie? Caitlin? Hello?
Maybe we're out getting supplies.
Out where?
Getting.
You wouldn't both go?
Millie? Caitlin? I'll check inside.
Huck.
We would have answered.
Over there. There's a note.
Dear Huck, we're sorry to write this, but we felt we needed to leave. We are not angry, but it's hard to trust you after yesterday. If we meet again under different circumstances, I hope we can start again and be friends. M and K. They're gone?
I'm sorry, Huck.
They're gone? God!
Oops. Okay. So that was like kind of an intense scene. We went on a little bit of a journey. What happens in the scene? Who are the characters?
All right, we've got a microphone for anybody that wants to talk.
Oh. Okay, so the characters are, is it Huck or Puck?
Huck, yep.
Huck? Okay, so Huck, his imaginary friends, and the people who didn't show.
Very well done. And what's happening? Could you get a sense of what Huck was doing in this scene?
I think he was severely alone and wanted to be with people. So when he was like, oh my God, I think I have friends. And then he realized that they didn't show because he's a weirdo and he's probably always going to be a weirdo. He had a mental breakdown, as one should, you know, heartbroken.
It's very understanding. Could you tell where Huck was? Could you get a sense of the different places that Huck was moving through?
Like places? Mm-hmm. Like New Orleans, was he? I'm joking, I'm joking.
Anybody else? Thank you very much, thank you. Could anybody tell where Huck was?
I think he was like somewhere like out in the forest because I heard like raining and birds chirping, so like humming or something. And he like when he went into the house it like stopped, and I think like that's why I heard raining. It's because he was outside.
Well done. Yes. So he was outside. He's moving around. And what? Oh, go for it. Yes.
Yeah, like there was a really strong sense of the sort of post-apocalyptic environment. So I felt that strongly, and also it was like this other place he was like in his head, like he was. So that was really powerful.
Yes. Okay.
Yeah.
So you all were able to pick up on all these things, and I'll ask the other questions. But I just want to point out what you all noticed because it's brilliant and it's the beauty of audio fiction. No, a narrator didn't spell out those things for you. For example, the characters that are in Huck's mind, you can tell that because there's a filter on the voices that are coming from his head. And you have been trained through years of watching movies and listening to radio and listening to songs and reading books to know that that filter probably means this isn't happening in real life. So you can hear how he sounds when he's outside walking, but you also hear those voices and you know it's in his head. And so you can sense this is a person who may not be all together, who may be going through some kind of a breakdown. And that's a lot to parse through just with like one little filter. But that's like kind of the beauty of audio fiction. And now you know that he's in a forest because there are all these sounds. No one has to tell you that. And you always want to be showing rather than telling in any storytelling, but in particular in audio fiction, where there's so much you want to say and there's so much backstory you want to give, but you can only say so much before people just start tuning you out. So you know that he's walking through he's walking through the space, and then he goes to another space, and he's not okay, and he's getting ready to meet people because he's talking to himself, but also to these voices, and you know all that with just a few sound cues. And that's sort of, I just wanted to point out that you're brilliant and that you're already picking all that stuff up. Okay, so can you talk about, let's see, how does the character feel, and how do you know?
I was gonna say, it sounds like you can hear that his desperation for connection. Like, it sounded like his palms were sweating, or like, yeah, that's like the vibe he gave off. And then the voices that he was hearing were definitely coping mechanisms for his comfort or his need and desire to be comforted.
And could you tell that if he had a change in emotion throughout the scene that you listened to?
Yeah, I feel like it was kind of like the story building. The climax was him getting to the door after he had practiced how he was going to greet them. And then he like got upset when they left. He was throwing things around. So yeah, there was definitely a build up and a tension into like this breakdown.
Beautiful, excellent. So the music in that scene, I just wanted to be sure to point that out, that Huck is feeling hopeful as he's walking to the bunker where the girls he's trying to meet where they live. And so the music is just kind of subtle. It's strings, which typically they're a lighter sound and they imply hopefulness. And so you hear that string music and you feel what he feels, which is a little bit of hope. And then he gets to the bunker, and then we don't just like gradually go to different kinds of music. Now it's rock music, and it is loud and it's angry, and the strings next to the rock music and the quickness of that turn are meant to indicate to you as the listener he's not okay. He doesn't have a grasp on his emotions, and they can swing violently from like, this is gonna be okay, it's hopeful, I'm keeping myself calm, to like I am enraged and out of control. And so all of these little personality traits, all of the things that he's feeling, regardless of, I mean, all he's talking about is rehearsing a speech and talking about books, but you're supposed to know how he feels inside, and that's the work that the music is doing. So, so well done, everyone, you're great listeners. Next up is scene work, which we've kind of talked a lot about. So when you're working on a scene, which is, a scene is exactly what it's like in a movie. You want to keep people in a particular place at a particular time for like a continuous, it just goes on and on and on for like 5 minutes. It shouldn't be too long, you know, but you have people in a room for a certain amount of time and something is happening, and that's a scene. It's not just quietness, it's not void. You're supposed to know that you're in that place and you're not supposed to forget. And there are all kinds of ways that you can portray that you're in a scene. In the example that we just heard from The Truth, we have the forest sounds all throughout. You hear the birds chirping, you hear forest kind of insects, you hear the crunching of the leaves, and then we get inside, which is a kind of a quieter place to be. But when he knocks on the door, he opens it, he goes down steps, he starts throwing everything around. You get the sense that he's in a bunker instead of outside. And so that's what you want to do in audio fiction. You want to place people in a scene. It's really powerful because it helps people to see and get fully immersed in your story. So well, let me talk specifically about what makes something a scene. So scenes engage the senses. So you could see as well as hear things, and that's really important. You gave the example of like you feel like his palms would be sweaty. A scene can do that for you. It just like immerses you that much further. And when you're writing something for a scene or when you're recording a scene, you should be trying to evoke a feeling in your audience. And that should be whatever the character is feeling or whatever is most important for them to know or to feel. You should portray and enhance with the place that the scene is taking place in. Next up, characters should have a relationship to a scene. So a lot of times people will feel tempted to like put something in a really cool place because it's a really cool place, like in front of a waterfall, because like waterfalls are amazing. But if the characters have nothing to do with waterfalls, if there's no reason that they're in that scene, it's going to feel out of place, and your listener will know that. It will just be like, well, they were having a very intense conversation with their mom, and now they're just at a waterfall eating breakfast for literally no reason. It doesn't serve the story. So your scenes should serve your story. Your characters should have some kind of a connection to where they are. And then, I just said that. They should be complementary to the story. Again, I just can't stress enough. You see this in movies sometimes where there'll be like a random, pretty cool but random shot, and you're like, oh, the director just wanted to get that cool shot, and that has not, the characters had no reason to go there. They just wanted it for the sake of putting it there. Audio fiction, especially because you have a limited amount of time to hold on to people's attention, you really want to be intentional about the scenes that you're including. And so giving them a relationship to the place and having the place complement the story is really important. So this next bit of audio I'm going to play, it's from a show called Appearances, and this is, in this piece you'll hear Sharon, who is at a wedding, kind of wrestling with something that she's been struggling with the entire series. And because she is in this particular place, at this particular time, it's going to help her to make a decision. So this is a true story, and all of the following clips that I'll play for you are true stories that use elements of audio fiction. So we will listen to it, and then we'll debrief.
My brother and his bride sit in front of a giant contract. It's the size of a poster. Beside them sits the rabbi, and all around them are us, their family members, siblings, cousins, aunts, uncles, cheering them on as if at a giant pep rally for their marriage.
God said, I made this world. It's your job to continue.
Under the table, the bride and groom hold hands, his thumb softly tapping on hers, as if in rhythm with her heartbeat. They look transported, as if they are not sitting at a plastic folding table, but instead are floating on a magic carpet. As if they are not signing a contract where he promises to make X amount of money and she promises to always be available for sex, but instead, he is committing to devoutly worshiping her, kissing her all over her body every single night. And she is committing to holding his head against her heart and eternally singing to him a siren's song. And that's when it hits me. I don't resent my brother and his bride for choosing the traditional life. I am jealous of them. Jealous that by getting married within the confines of the community, their relationship comes with all these structures that will help them keep coming back to each other. Structures that are more solid than whatever indecisiveness or moodiness they might feel on the day-to-day. Structures that are more solid than the question, are we happy? After they both sign the contract, my father and her father sign it as well, as witnesses. And then all of the first cousins, Kel. And then the two dads gleefully embrace each other. They did it. Their children are married off. Check. One less thing to worry about in life. And as the room buzzes around me, people gleefully congratulating the happy couple, I look at my phone. 11 missed calls. All from Ponch. I compose a text. Ponch, I made a big mistake tonight, not inviting you. Please, please, please forgive me. I love you, and I've thought about your question in the serious way, the way you wanted me to think about it. Yes, let's be together, all the way, committed, no more TTBU. let's get married, or something like married, and let's have our kid. I put the phone back in my pocket, and I hear the rabbi say to my brother and his bride, and I quote, "That's it, you're done, you're good to go."
Okay, so what did you see as you were listening to that?
I see a married couple like just being happy, and then the protagonist, the sister, I think, just being like kind of mad but like looking happy so she doesn't get the family's attention. And then I see her like thinking that she doesn't really want them together because she like really jealous of, she's envious. And then when she sees that her phone was ringing, she wants to get married just to be equal as her brother.
Oh, well done. You saw a lot. How about, okay, yep, we have it. It's always fun with this one too because everyone you see something, a little different.
I was transported to Crown Heights, Brooklyn, to the Chabad community at a Jewish Orthodox, ultra-Orthodox community, sort of cloistered community where, there's very set, rigid norms of good and bad and women's roles, and somebody who perhaps doesn't fit in that and perhaps has a lover or partner outside of that community.
Yes, I think we have down here and then one more.
For me, the image was very powerfully about, I guess, my own like relating to the protagonist, like being in a place with a bunch of other people but feeling completely alone and like being this observer of this mass of people doing something. They're totally absorbed in it and being that one person or feeling like the person who's like observing this sort of organized chaos and feeling separate from it. And so it's like being in the place, but also not being there. And so that was very powerful, like the protagonist and then everybody else doing this thing. Like that was the vision for me.
Perfect. I love that.
Hi. Okay, I have a question.
Yes.
Is she pregnant?
No.
Okay, thank you.
I think we have one more up here.
I was definitely, like, going off of the previous point as well, like, it felt like there's this room full of, like, happy people, and they're all, like, celebrating, and she's, like, the one person alone at the table, or maybe surrounded by other people, but she feels like she's just all alone, like, a spotlight's on her, and she's like, wow, look at this, like, couple. They seem so sure when they signed that contract. It's set in stone. It's, like, written down. So, like, I definitely see her, like, all alone, kind of like, when you're on your own, you, like, see someone, like, in love, and you're like, oh, dang. That's how, like, I felt like she was kind of like, and so, like, it definitely, like, I pictured her right away. Like, everybody's, like, happy around her, and she's, like, the one person in the center, like, well, geez, like, I'm over here, like, all on my own kind of thing. So that's how I felt the protagonist was also.
Okay, so something that kind of all of you picked up on and added to it was your own spin, your own interpretation, even beyond what the protagonist said. And keeping you in that scene, especially that wedding scene, she didn't do a ton, like you heard in that first clip, of you didn't continuously hear wedding music and crowds chanting, but she brought them in enough times to hold you there, and then had this kind of internal conflict and turmoil that you could invest in. And it makes sense that she would have that turmoil at a wedding because weddings spark those kind of questions in people. And you can relate to that if you've been to a wedding or if you've kind of been in a situation where you've watched people in love and then been wondering about whatever decisions you're making. And that's the power of having it be a scene versus a narrator sort of, well, she is a narrator and she is spelling it out, but instead of just saying that with words, she adds in music at these specific times that give you this, that take you back to Crown Heights and make you feel like you're there. Oh, yes.
I just wanted to add, like, I thought it was interesting that that cheering was used, like she would make a point and then it just seemed to validate her point. So it was like, we're hearing the wedding, but we're also hearing her getting validated in whatever opinion she's having, right?
Yes, exactly. And you're hearing it. This is not an unbiased narrator. This is not like a dispassionate person. You are hearing it through the lens of a person who is invested in their own story and who is not perfect. So she hears the cheering at moments that seem to justify or validate whatever it is that she's wrestling with. Because the goal in audio fiction is not to take yourself out of the narrative. And especially, this is an audio diary, and so especially if you're doing something really personal like that, you want to put yourself in it a lot. And then you want to use music and sound design to elevate the way that you're feeling. And something when you're scoring things, which sort of, this moves us into the music section, which unfortunately I can't play all the clips, but we've heard a lot of it here. You want to use music to elevate subtle emotions. So if you have, for example, a character who's overcome adversity and is so excited, and then you play the Rocky theme, it's going to sound corny, and people are going to laugh even if you don't mean it to. And that's because you don't really want to use music that's so obvious that it hits on that emotion. You want to use something subtle. So for example, we heard in the piece before sort of that siren song, and that's sort of illustrating the subtle way in which she's being lulled to the idea of marriage. And you don't have to be able to spell that out specifically as you listen, but all you need to do is be able to feel that, to be able to feel and to understand how she's being swayed into that idea. So you want to use music subtly. You don't really want to use it on the big emotions, because the big emotions already have a soundtrack. Your listener understands that. But it's like tension, anxiety, kind of like the hope, being on the edge of something, those subtle things that they're hard to spell out with words, but you can find an instrument to do that for you, or you can find a sound to do that for you. So that's one of the things music does. Music and sound design are like my favorite things to play around with. They're so fun. They can do all the work for you if you let them. There's the traditional ways that people use music for theme songs, for breaks. So, you have a segment on this, play some music, now you have a segment for that. It's a little bit of a palate cleanser, or to signal to the listener sort of pay attention now, or this is ending, or it's a commercial break, like very traditional ways. Then you've got it to emphasize and illustrate an emotion, which we just talked about. You want to keep those subtle. Next, you can use it. This is sort of like an under-celebrated way to use music, but I love it. And it's like move a story along. So you might have like a lot of information that you need to convey because it's important to convey it, but it's like kind of boring, but it's important. And you want people to listen. So you put some music underneath that, and then you just kind of rattle off whatever your facts are. They should still be relevant to your story. It needs to be good tape. You can't put music under bad tape and make it good. But it is really helpful if you just need people to listen for a little bit as you rattle off a bunch of facts. And then they can depict a concept. So Radiolab does this brilliantly. They have an episode called, something about the rainbow. But in it, they want to show you how a human sees the rainbow versus how a dog sees the rainbow versus how a raven sees the rainbow. And so to do that, they have people sing out the different colors that people see the rainbow through. And this is to sort of help you to depict this very complicated, very complex concept that you need to be able to understand and to connect with emotionally to understand the rest of the episode. But it's really hard. It would be very boring if they just said it in words of like, well, you have 3 cones and they have 4 cones and they have 5. But instead you hear a choir sing out what it sounds like to see in 3 cones and what it sounds like to see in 5 cones. And it's just this really brilliant way to like connect you with it that much further. So you can play around with sound and with music in really interesting ways. And the goal is to have that do some of the work of the storytelling. So instead of you having to say, in the piece that we listened to before, Sharon is very sad. She's unsure. She wants to get married. Oh, now she knows. Instead, she's kind of saying little things and the music is emphasizing it. And so that helps move it along. I had a beautiful, this is one of the most beautiful podcasts ever created, but we don't really have time to listen to that piece. But please go home and listen to Floodlines. Antediluvian is the first episode. It's about Hurricane Katrina. It is gorgeous. They use music and sound design in the exact right, perfect way. do yourself a favor and listen to it. But I really want to play this last piece for you, so we're going to keep moving, but that sound, and I was going to ask you some really deep questions, but we'll save that for this last one. Finally, what audio fiction does is you want characters. So I mentioned this before, but everyone talking in audio fiction is a character in the story. And so they have opinions, they have flaws, they are real, they're people. It's very difficult. My students do this all the time, where they will write a story and they take them to, I did this actually. So much of my podcast is me wrestling with this. I made the show and I didn't want it to be about me. I was like, I'm gonna interview everybody else, but I don't want to talk about myself. But then everyone is so curious about who you are. It's just the nature of this. If you are telling people a story, they're just gonna be wondering, why am I listening to you? Why are you telling me the story? What's your investment in the story? So save yourself some trouble, don't be humble, just if you're writing the story, then put yourself in it, make yourself a full character. And in order to make yourself a character in the story, or any character in a story, needs a goal and motivations. So if you have a waiter on the scene, they need to be dropping off water or something. You can't just have waiters floating around just talking. That's strange. So and everyone from a random walk-on character to the main characters needs some type of a goal or motivation. They need strengths and flaws. It's really good. I mean, if you listen to the rest of that Appearances podcast, the narrator is deeply flawed and does not hide that. She's got a lot of strengths and she's got a lot of flaws. And that makes somebody feel real. No one's gonna believe that they're like, you know, you have like a Glinda, like the Good Witch of the West, and everything is perfect. That's going to make them boring, and you can't really relate to a person like that. So you want to highlight both. They need external and internal conflicts. So in the beginning, when I took you through that narrative arc, my conflict I was wrestling with was like, what do I want to do professionally? And everybody should have, a story needs a conflict. It doesn't have to be a big fight between two people. But the protagonist needs to want to do something, needs to be going for something, and there should be an obstacle. They wrestle with it, it goes away, boom, it's done. So you're going to the store, you were going to get milk, but then, that's your conflict. And finally, you know, you want to give your stories your character's backstory. So something that we do on The Truth is that when people are writing a fictional story, they will write an outline for the story, what they want to have happen, and then they'll take all the characters in that outline and they'll write what's called a character Bible. And this is, you know, you do this in Hollywood, you do this everywhere, where you outline, this is the story of this character. This is their life, this is their relationship with their parents, with their friends. Teachers didn't believe they would be great in school. They love the color purple. You write all these things out. And then when you are putting the character in the story, you know how they would act because you know that they have this difficult relationship with their father. And when somebody says something like that, it triggers that feeling. And so you know, okay, my character's gonna act this way. And it helps you to keep your characters really consistent and believable, and helps you to have them act in ways that make sense and aren't just like you can tell when someone says, did your boyfriend cheat on you? And you can sort of hear that it's like, oh, you just had that character say that to make this thing happen, to trigger these actions, versus a person who's naturally inquisitive and it's just like, oh, it's so weird that your boyfriend keeps hanging out with that other person. Do you think that they're cheating on you? And then you're sort of like, oh, well, this person would ask that because they're constantly asking questions. So your character should have a little bit of a backstory. So this last piece that I'm going to play from you is from a podcast called Have You Heard George's Podcast? That's the name of it. And it's by a guy named George. He lives in Britain. It's a beautiful podcast, highly recommend. And in this piece that you're going to hear, George is, he's Ugandan and he's British. And he is constantly wrestling with these dual identities. And so he's figured out a way to portray the struggle that he's had all of his life in a way that you can connect with. And so we will listen to his conversations. There's gonna be 2 phone calls, or a phone call and an in-person conversation, and then we will debrief what you've heard. And you're listening for like the characters, for the character work that he's done. So in this first piece, he is calling Uganda, and he's personified the country of Uganda.
Hello, Uganda. You've been on my mind. I'm coming next month, but when I land, I'm still on my grind. You know, 20th December, I got my first Kampala show with Aka Dope.
So exciting.
Yo, that night I'm drinking pineapple. Jagala pineapple. I missed you.
I missed you too, Judge.
I want to be honest with you. And I don't want that to be an issue. It's been 20 years since we met. Where's all the time gone?
Can you imagine?
I thought you were the most gorgeous thing I'd ever laid eyes on. I was young, but I knew this obsession would be lifelong.
You are so young, Bambi. How's Britain?
She's alright. Getting cold. I'm sure you've seen there's an election coming.
Are you running? Or are you still running from your destiny?
Yo, if I became a politician now, my mouth would definitely get the best of me.
Yeah. Politics is a touchy subject.
If I ask about your politics, are you gonna get upset?
You can ask.
How you feeling?
I feel strange. I want peace, but I need real change.
Okay, so that's his conversation with Uganda. And now I'm going to play his conversation, a little bit of his conversation with Britain.
So you're happy with how everything rolled out?
I mean, no doubt. Not one part of me feels like we sold out.
I guess the BBC partnership really is working. Looks like they put some serious work in.
Hey, Britain, listen, they've been a dream. I mean, the BBC is an underrated machine. I feel like everybody on my project played as a team, and I still retain the space to say what I mean. And they really picked the prime time moments to slap my big face on the screen. I love it. I love their support. I love their marketing budget.
Yeah.
They're taking my messages to the heart of the public. And obviously there's always controversy and bureaucracy, but as a project in democracy, for this whole thing to be funded by license fee money, says a lot about you as a country.
Tell me more about me as a country.
Britain, I love you. I don't even think you really know your worth. Past 100 years, you've had a lot to adjust to. Not long ago, you used to roam the earth controlling turf. And even though you're not allowed to say it, I get why you might want that to last. But you know, life comes at you fast.
Ouch. But I guess I have had some soul searching to do.
Okay, so could you tell a little bit about the personalities of both those countries? Were you able to suss anything out?
I'm not sure if it's personalities, but what I got was the relationship with Uganda seemed to me to be quite nostalgic and in the past and kind of dreamlike, whereas his relationship with Britain seemed to be like in the now. That was the real, the everyday. And the other one was some other time and something in his, maybe in his imagination, and maybe I'm personalizing it because I have the same conflict, except it's not Uganda. But so that's what I got immediately from it. was that kind of conflict of nostalgia and dream and everyday reality, which is the Briton.
Absolutely. So it's something that's so powerful about this, and something that there's all these subtle things that he does to demonstrate his relationship. He's calling Uganda. And so especially when you're listening to it in headphones, you can hear that it's a phone call, because he is Ugandan, but he doesn't live there, and they're catching up. Whereas he's in person, you can hear there's kind of like nighttime noises, and you can hear that he is in person talking face to face with Britain. And so that even just depicts so much just in that. And then you're right, the tone, they kind of like had all these inside jokes when he's talking to Uganda. He's asking for permission to say difficult things, versus with Britain, where he's just kind of saying the thing, and it indicates a level of comfort with Britain and a lack of sort of distance that it seems present with Uganda. Yes? Oh, here he comes with it.
His speech with Britain is measured, that he's rhyming, right? So there's a kind of there's a different kind of sense of how the language functions. Whereas I feel like in his conversation with Uganda, there's a sense that there's a more free flow, it's more personal, it's more like unplanned, it's not like crafted, so pre-articulated. And I think with the speaking with Britain, and also there's a definite accent change and change in cadence, and like there's I think at the level of that, I think there's a huge difference. And I think it's interesting, because I was thinking, is it that the rhyming, does it make it more stiff? Does it make it more orderly? Does it make it more, like Apollonian in a sense? So I think in that sense, for me, this is like from the play, and the laughter is different also. So there's, I would say these. So I feel like while there's a sense of assimilation, I think there's definitely, for me, there's a retention of a certain kind of discomfort that carries with the performance.
Yes.
And that is kind of owned somehow.
Yes, there's a definite difference in the way you hear the code switching between the two, which also tells you so much, just in the change in his accent. Yes, ma'am.
Hi.
Hi.
Okay, so in his conversation with Uganda, like, it felt more like talking to a best friend that you haven't seen in a long time. And I know because I haven't seen my besties in too long, and so the times that I do see them, we talk about things that happened, and we talk about things that we've been through together, and we don't really talk about the present or things that are happening now or that are gonna happen, because we don't know what's happening in each other's lives, you know? Like, it's like, oh, this happened to us back then, but we don't know what's happening now, you know?
Yes, yes. I think that's such a good point. The things that he chooses to talk to, I think somebody talked about nostalgia. He just chooses to sink right back into nostalgia. And just to sort of wrap us up, the kind of audio fiction techniques that are at play here is he is struggling with something that so many people struggle with, that I struggle with, which is assimilation, which is being from two different cultures. And instead of just sort of saying, I'm struggling with having to assimilate, I'm struggling with the fact that I love Uganda and I love Britain for two very different reasons, and they fill two very different roles in my life, he decided to personify them. And we didn't get to listen to the whole of the pieces, but both countries have characteristics. They both are flawed, which you'll hear when they're talking, and they both have strengths. And they both play a role in the larger narrative of this episode, which is struggling with assimilation and struggling with figuring out your identity and where you belong. And instead of, again, just sort of spelling that out, he's just decided to fictionalize it a bit, and so that you can connect with it in a unique way, in whatever ways in which you struggle with identity and you wrestle with these two different parts of you, you can sort of plop those on the characters of Britain and Uganda and feel the piece that much more. And so just like putting characters in your stories and really spending time with them and letting us get to know them and letting us feel them in a real way. You don't have to give them a ton of characteristics. It can just be what you decide to have them talk about. All of that does so much for helping your audience to connect that much more with what you're saying. Okay, y'all. I think that might be all that we got. Uh-oh, now it's off the rails. Okay. No.
BBC Sounds.
I would love to play another clip for you. We could do this all day. Yeah, so that's everything. So just to sort of like, just to recap, we talked about the narrative arc, which is really important in all your storytelling. Always follow it. It always works. Or don't. Maybe you can figure it out another way. But we're trained to follow the narrative arc. We understand it as all humans. It's a great tool to use to be sure that you're telling stories in compelling ways. You want to be sure that your stories are happening in a place, so place them in a scene. You don't have to do a ton of work like in that first clip to have the scene going on, but just have it fade in and out. Have us come back from time to time so that we know where we are and we connect with that scene and we feel grounded in it. You want to use music and sound design when and where you can to do the work of communicating the emotions for you. I can't stress that enough. You could just be talking. I could say, I feel so good. I think this presentation is going really well, but I could play like doubtful sounding music, and you as the audience would get, oh, she doesn't feel so good about it. She's trying to hype herself up. You could read so much into that just with the addition of that music. And then finally, characters. If you are writing the story, you are going to be a character in it. Unless you're reporting, in which case you should not be. You should try to be as unbiased as you can. But if you're telling the story, you're a character in it, and everybody else who's in the story is a character. And that means they need just something that makes them human, makes them more than just a cardboard cutout that's like sort of serving a purpose in your narrative. And if you do all of those things, you will have something beautiful and something that just that we can connect with on a visceral level. That's more than just words. And that's sort of the beauty of audio fiction. So that is all I got. Wait, there's one more slide. Oh, yeah. Oh, okay. So this is me. So if you want to get in touch, please go to my website. That's so weird to say. Go to my website. I'm saying it with confidence. Go there, and we can connect. I have like my work up there, but also just have my contact information. I would love to stay in touch. I am not kidding around. I do calls like all the time with people who just want to run ideas by me or who are working on something. I'm not so like fancy that I won't do that. So please get in touch. Please stay in touch and let me know if you have any other questions. I guess, should we do questions? If people have questions now? What do you think?
We can do like a
chill.
Question.
Yeah.
Chill question.
Okay.
Please join me in thanking Nichole Hill. If you're not signed up already to the VPM ICA Community Center mailing list, please do that. It's at icavcu.org/programming. I don't know what the site is. Community media, icavcu.org/community media. And there's a little join the list thing, and then we'll give you all the info about all the fancy, awesome stuff that we're going to be doing in the future, which is super dope. Trust me. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, y'all. I'll be around if you have questions. Get that off the screen. Okay. Thank you. It's so weird to do in person.
you.